Okay, welcome to Temple Talks. And this is Susan Bronson, who's with us this evening from the Yiddish Book Center in the Amherst, Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts, lovely Berkshires. So welcome everyone. We're delighted that you're here and that you can learn more about the Yiddish Book Center if you've not already visited. Yiddish Book Center provides a tremendous amount of resources. As Adam Lansky, who started the program, helped in the organization and the collection of Yiddish materials, which reflect the European history of Jews in Eastern Europe. And we're delighted that Susan can be with us this evening to share more about it. We'll ask everyone to go on mute. So I'll make sure that everybody is on mute. Let's check that for a second. And Bob will check that everyone is on mute so that we can do that. If you have any questions, you can put them in chat or you can save till the end where Susan will be happy to take questions at that point. And you can discover along with the rest of us more about the Yiddish Book Center and its function and what it's meaning for the Jewish people going forward. So welcome and good evening, Susan. I want to turn the screen over to you and the microphone and say, please share. We want to learn more about the Yiddish Book Center and support it. It's all up to you. Go for it. Oh, we got to get you back on.
There we go.
There you
It wouldn't. That's not good if I'm muted. That would be problematic.
No, it wouldn't.
Well, I thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm really looking forward to telling you a little bit more about the Yiddish Book Center. I know a couple of you know a little bit, but hopefully you'll learn a little bit more, and we'll be able to discuss things at the end. I wanted to start by showing you a short film about the center's history. Those of you who visited might have seen the film, but I hope you can bear with us because I think it's a great introduction to the beginnings of the Yiddish Book Center. And then I'm going to talk about what we're doing now and why it matters and why, you know, we should care about Yiddish and Yiddish books and Yiddish history and culture. So I'm going to share my screen and show you the film, and then I will tell you more about what's happening now. So give me one moment here. All righty. This is Bridge of Books, the History of the Yiddish Book Center, featuring Aaron Lansky.
Yiddish was the spoken language of roughly 3/4 of the world's Jews for the past 1,000 years. Books were our portable homeland. Books define our national identity. We call ourselves Am HaSefer, the people of the book. And yet, here are books being destroyed. When I first came up with this idea to go rescue the world's Yiddish books, the response everywhere was essentially the same. Don't you know Yiddish is dead? Don't you know no one cares about this culture any longer? Why don't we give you a nice scholarship and you can go off and study in Israel? What do you have to waste your time with these old books that nobody wants? In those days, they said that, well, all of Yiddish literature was out of print. If you wanted to find an out-of-print Yiddish book, you could go to an obscure book dealer in Amsterdam, or else you might find it in a garbage can in Brooklyn, and there wasn't too much in between. First of all, you have to understand, I was 23 years old when all this came about. I was studying Yiddish literature. Probably would have gone on to a very conventional academic career were it not for this one very basic problem. There were no books to read. Each week, our professor would assign us, I don't know, a novel by any of dozens of major Yiddish writers. So right after class, one of us would race off and be the first one to get to the Jewish Public Library and find a copy of the book. But for the rest of us, there were no books to be had. So I started putting up notices, little signs on the Jewish delicatessen and the laundromat in the old Jewish neighborhood saying, I'm a young graduate student, I'm looking for Yiddish books. So before I knew it, people are calling up, boxes of books are piled high, and my apartment is overflowing with piles and piles and piles of Yiddish books. And it was somewhere along that point, I got a phone call from my parents, and they said, Aaron, I think you have to come home because the rabbi's given us so many books, we're afraid the second story of the house is about to collapse. And I think it was just about that moment that the Yiddish Book Center was born. Well, I had no clue what the actual work of going around and collecting Yiddish books really entailed. Along with all these boxes of books came letters and postcards from older Jews who would write and say, I have many books to give you, but I'm too old, or I'm too infirm, or there are just too many books. You're going to have to come and get them. So in mid-July of 1980, I set out on my very first collection trip. I received a postcard which came from an elderly man, and I knew already how old he was because it was a penny postcard which came postage due. So he writes in this very scratchy handwriting, he said, I'm a very old man. I am leaving on a trip to Israel. I'm afraid that I might not return, and if I don't, I'm afraid they will throw away my books. Will you please help me? I show up at noon, and in this tiny one-room apartment, all there was a little small bed. There was a metal table with a hot plate and a million bottles of medicine. And other than that, the apartment was full of boxes and piles of both Yiddish and Hebrew books. Well, I figured, all right, you take the books, you put them on the hand truck, you roll them out to the truck, fartik, and you move on to the next stop. It wasn't to be. He sat me down at the table. He says, oh, no, he says, Junger man, young man, which became sort of my generic name in the Yiddish world. He says, Junger man, he says, I first have to tell you about each of these books. He began handing me every one of these books, one volume at a time. He says, this book here, my wife and I, we bought in 1927. We went without lunch for a week. We should be able to afford it. And this book, have you read this book? Sit down right now, look at this book. It went on for hours and hours and hours. So far behind schedule. When I finally have his books in the truck, I'm about to drive off, and he says, "En minut, junger man," he says, "Wohin läufst du? Where are you running to?" I said, "Where am I running?" I said, "I have other stops to make. I'm already behind schedule." He says, "Oh," he says, "Ihr versteht nicht, you don't understand," he said. And he explained that when he received my telegram, he told all the other people in the building that I was coming. He said, "They all have books for you. Let's get to work." I look up. It's like this 12-story high-rise building. I said, "All the people have books." I said, "That's right, they all have books. Let's start going." We walk into the building. He knocks on every door. People come up with shopping bags and boxes, suitcases even full of books for me. And of course, what do you think you have to do at every single apartment? They bring you inside. They sit you down at the table. They make a glass of tea. They get the intimate cakes come out of the box, and the Luxon Kiglach that have been waiting all day come out of the oven. And they feed me, and they tell me the story of their books as well. Here I am, 23 years old, in jeans and a t-shirt, but somehow it's fallen on me to try to pick up the fragments of this world and save them for the future. Because when people give you their books, it's a very candid moment in their lives. They're handing you the treasures they've accumulated in their lifetime, and they know their own children and their own grandchildren don't want. Invariably, they're crying. They tell stories with a candor that would probably be very rare in their lives. So it's a very special moment. There was a sort of emotional understanding that when people hand you their books, as they say to you, "Junger man, ot is mein Yerusha, here is my inheritance, this is what I am leaving to the world." What they're leaving to you is a world that is very fast vanishing. It was a world that was shattered in the Holocaust. It was a world that simply vanished under the pressures of assimilation. These were the people who themselves had created a new world. And it was a new world in which very few people were now interested. And so here we were. They had so much to tell us. There was a sort of understanding that what was happening was a moment in history. I mean, I knew that from the very first trip, and I never forgot that, and I have not forgotten it 21 years later. Early on, it became apparent there was no way that a handful of young people were going to be able to, round up thousands of what turned out to be hundreds of thousands of Yiddish books. So we organized a network of what we call Sammlers, or volunteer book collectors. The idea went way back to the early years of the 20th century, when Jewish historians of Eastern Europe had called for a network of these Sammlers, or volunteer collectors, to round up communal records. It's been an enormously emotional experience for us, our encounters with the Sammlers over the years. For them, this was really, it was cultural preservation. It was saving their own lives and their own life stories. They had a real urgency in what they were doing. I think the real question, though, is how come so many people care about dusty old Yiddish books they can't read in the first place? When my mother's mother came to America, she was carrying with her a valise in which she had everything she had brought with her from the old country. Her older brother met her and took the suitcase, and he flung it overboard. Her photographs of her parents, her clothing, her Shabbos candlesticks, everything she had with her was thrown out. He understood that the price of admission to America was to throw the old country away. But I think for my generation, I am finally secure enough in my Americanism that I can now go back and I can dredge the harbor and I can find the suitcase that was thrown out. In the beginning, I was literally hitchhiking from city to city. Every time I would speak, 5 people, 10 people, 15 people would sign up as members. So that today the book center is supported by over 30,000 members. We're one of the largest Jewish cultural organizations in the country. We have this wonderful building. It gives to Yiddish what we call in Yiddish an adres, which in Yiddish means a little more than an address. It means it gives it a place in the world. I will never forget when I stood there that first night after we finally moved into the building. Yiddish had finally found a home. But the next challenge was, how do you interpret that literature for the 99% of the visitors who can't read those books in the original? So we organized educational programs. We're doing exhibitions. And of course, we have the core of books. We've augmented or established collections of Yiddish literature at 450 major university and research libraries in 26 countries around the world. And then in the summertime, we have groups of student interns who come. We teach them Yiddish in the morning, and they spend the rest of their day going through these boxes and unburying treasures. Now that we don't have to worry about the physical preservation of the literature, we have a much bigger worry. Today, the challenge is, how do you open up the books and share the culture with a broader world? And for that, the work's just begun.
Okay, so that film was made 20 years ago. The Yiddish Book Center is now 42 years old. Whoops, I'm still Hold on a second. Let me fix my screen share here and shut that off. Oops, sorry about that, people.
Okay, the music is nice.
Yeah, I know, but I want to, yeah, I have to get back to where I was here. What the heck? Stop share. Okay, let's see if hopefully I'll be able to get to my next screen share when the time comes. And the music will end. I'm sorry about this, guys. Just give me one more second. I'm gonna see if I can. Here we go. There we go. There we go. All right, now we got it. So we've grown in the 42 years that we've been in our existence from an organization that was focused primarily on just rescuing the books to an established cultural center with a staff of 40 people and a wide range of programs and initiatives, all designed to do what Aaron in his film has said is to open up the books literally and metaphorically to new generations. And I'll give you a sense of the range of activities that we have now. But first of all, the books. Aaron mentioned the rescue of the books and the distribution of many books to libraries around the country. But one of the most important things that we've done is we became pioneers in book digitization. We have nearly 12,000 Yiddish books online, and they're available for free. And you might wonder how many people are actually reading Yiddish books. Well, I think you'll be surprised to learn that our online books have been downloaded more than 5 million times. That is wildly beyond what any of us could have imagined when we first began digitizing the books. Who are these readers? Well, they're older Yiddish speakers. They're people in the Hasidic community who are reading them surreptitiously because actually the secular Yiddish literature is considered treif. But most of all, it's a younger generation of Yiddish students and academics who are doing research, who are discovering Yiddish literature for the first time. We've also developed something called Yiddish OCR, that's optical character recognition. And what that means is anyone can go and enter a name, a word, or a place into our search engine, and the program will search millions of pages of Yiddish books and find where that place, name, or word appears in those books. So if you're a student or a scholar doing research, you can imagine how transformative that is. Instead of going through thousands of books, you've got a computer program that basically can identify what you're looking for in seconds. So it really transforms the ability of scholars and students to do research and to learn about the culture. Most recently, we launched a collaboration with the National Library of Israel, YIVO, and the New York Public Library to create what we're calling the Universal Yiddish Library. So I mentioned that we've digitized 12,000 titles. We estimate that there are another 50,000 Yiddish books out there, many of which we do not own, but that are in the collections of these other institutions. And we are going to make sure all of these books are digitized and then all available through a single website. So Yiddish will become the first fully digitized literature in the world, which is quite a transition from, rescuing books out of dumpsters. The books will not only be rescued, but they'll be available to everyone all over the world online for free. But I think a big question that many of you might have is, what about all the people who don't read Yiddish? And of course, we know that many of people who are interested in Yiddish language and culture are never going to learn the language, but want to know more about it. And for that, we've developed an initiative to translate Yiddish books into English. We initially began with a project with Yale University Press, where Yale was publishing one book a year in translation. And with so many titles, it became quickly clear that that wasn't going to get us very far, one book a year. So we've decided to train a new generation of Yiddish translators. And we created a fellowship program 8 years ago. Since then, we've trained 80 translators, and they're all translating and publishing new works. What's fascinating about that too is that in the community of older Yiddish scholars, everyone knew about the same canon of books. And what this new generation is discovering is a whole range of books that this older generation wasn't even aware existed. Particularly interesting are the books they're finding by women who did not receive their due during their day, and who are now, these works are seeing the light of day and being translated. In fact, we've established our own printing imprint called White Goat Press to also bring these books into the world. Most recently, we published an autobiographical novel called Dina by a novelist called Ida Maza, who lived in was born in the Russian Empire and spent much of her life in Brooklyn, but nobody ever knew about this work. And it was newly uncovered by one of our younger translators, and it's been translated and it's now available through White Goat Press. So in addition to translating, educating is a key part of our work. We both teach Yiddish language to students and adults, and we also develop new Yiddish language instructional materials. One of the issues with teaching Yiddish is that some of the textbooks are really outdated and no one was trained really to teach Yiddish. So we published a new Yiddish language textbook. Whoops, it's funny how it comes up on my screen. It's called Inanum, and it is based in modern Yiddish pedagogy, and it's based in the contemporary ways of learning foreign languages. And it's just revolutionizing the teaching of Yiddish. In fact, we published it in August of 2020, and we've now sold almost 2,000 copies, which is wildly more than we would have imagined. And it's just a testament to the interest these days in learning Yiddish. We're also running programs designed to bring Yiddish and Jewish literature and culture to high school students, into classrooms by training day school teachers, and into congregations by engaging rabbis and congregational educators. This is through our Great Jewish Books program, where we bring people into a deep dive into Yiddish literature and culture so they can bring it back into their own settings. And for young people, it's really transformative and can be very inspiring from them. And we really want to see it. It's shocking, really, how little of this is taught in Jewish day schools and how little of it is transmitted in congregational settings, whether that's supplemental schools or in adult education programs. So these programs are designed to help give people the tools to bring that into their own communities. Another important initiative is our Wechsler Oral History Project. We realized that in addition to collecting books, the stories of native Yiddish speakers and those with deep connections to Yiddish were at risk of being lost. So this project was launched 12 years ago, and we've since collected more than 1,200 oral histories, each 1 to 2 hours long, from across the globe, the United States, Mexico, Argentina, Australia, Europe, Russia, Israel. And we not only collect these stories, but they're available on our website and searchable by keyword as well. So people can find what they're looking for and they can learn and discover these stories. And I thought you might enjoy seeing a couple of short clips to give you an idea how meaningful these are. And I'm going to try to share my screen again, and hopefully we'll find what I'm looking for. So let's see. Nope, that is not it. Oh, geez, did I lose it? Give me a second again. That's Bridge of Books. Okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna minimize this and I'm gonna go, nope, I've got it. Here we go. Apologies for my lack of facility with this, but here we go. Here is Sarah Tepper in conversation with Krista Whitney, who's the director of our oral history project. It's a very short excerpt.
We have a different screen showing, so we can't see it.
You can't. Hold on a minute. Wait a second. You're not seeing this screen?
No.
Okay, hold on a minute. Are you seeing the Yiddish Book Center screen now?
You're not share screening at the moment.
Oh, okay. Jeez Louise, I'm really sorry. Where's my Zoom?
Okay.
Well, how did that happen? All right, we're going to try this one more time. You see it now?
I do.
All right, excellent. We're going to go back. There we go. Okay.
Voneinander sagt, was ich vor keinem Moment vergessen. Und ich hoffe auch von mit Tränen, wenn der Mann sagt, kommt es auch zurück. Wenn wir haben gedacht, davor und zu kommen dort zu Amerika, haben wir gedacht, gehen nach Westminster und gehen zu einem Platz, wo wir haben, eine Bahn, zu gehen als Schiff. Die ganze Stadt hat da rausgekommen und sagen, ist mir vorne weg, so sagen uns vorbei. Aber mein Papa hat geweint, aber es ist noch gelaufen. Wir haben gestanden in einem Wagen mit mit Pferd, weil keiner doch nicht gehabt, keine Automobil. Ich und meine Schwester und meine Mama, wir gestanden in der Burgung und alle seine Tochter gewählt, mit geklappt und gelacht, als wir gehen, nur mein Papa gewählt. Und sie sind nur gelaufen dort im Burgen, bis ich keine mehr nicht leben mehr. Das Gedenken, wir sind nur gelaufen. Und wir haben da keine mehr gesagt.
So it's just heart-wrenching, and it's a kind of story that you do not find when you read a book about the time. I'm going to show you another one that is a little bit more lighthearted. Somebody you might recognize.
Oh, Leonard Nimoy.
Right.
Song that burned stuff into my brain, and I just fell in love with the song because I felt so identified with that song. It spoke of a boy who said to his mother, "There's this tree on the road, and all the figs and the wood and all the birds are flown away from the tree. I got miserable by the mountain. The wind lost the lane, after the tree. She was standing along with the storm coming. Moeder zei, Mama, eens een say Baba for you. In a moment, I want to become a bird. I want to go fly to that tree and sit on its branches and sing through the heat of somebody's
Die kaloschen en daarmee heet dat scharter winter. En die kies met die de roem, wij hier en Whitney. In de winterlabel, hier toen die schoite, ooit de winterjanking, gast, alle tweede.
And then he says, vind de vliegels is me schwer. Zoveel ondertussen de vliegelen schwer. I can't fly. My mother put on for me clothes.
Ik heb treurig weer rein in der Mama.
1924.
Had je liefschaftlich gelaufen.
Das ist eine interessante Zeit.
I so identified with it. I got away,
Hat man geht,
but it was tough. It was really tough. I remember my mother crying at the train station when I left. I was like my grandfather. I was taking off for another world. No way that was going to work.
Die Sprache von dem Land.
Von wann stammen deine Eltern?
Oh, we're hearing. What are we hearing now? Okay, I'm going to stop the share for a second.
Gebieten Sachländer.
Crying out loud here.
Amol ist gewesen Russland. Nordem ist geworden Österreich. Wie die Eltern sind geboren geworden, ist
I'm not sure what is going on here.
Im Jahr 1919 beim Vertrag von Versailles ist geworden Rumänien. Und im Jahr 1946.
Are you guys hearing something?
You have two videos playing at the same time. So
Yeah, I'm trying to get rid of the other one. I'm really sorry. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with this. I don't know what is playing right now.
look at your browser, you'll probably see some.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. There we go. Sorry about that.
Right.
One more glitch. So sorry that you didn't hear that as well as I would have liked. That was Leonard Nimoy, as you could see. Leonard Nimoy has a background in Yiddish and speaks fluent Yiddish, and it's just another example of the ways in which the oral history program is capturing these incredible stories from ordinary people and from celebrities who we all know and love, but whose Yiddish stories we haven't heard, and we don't know, the background tales that they haven't brought to life before. So in addition to what I've described so far, we publish an English language magazine. We offer a podcast and public programs on Yiddish literature and Jewish history and more. And we're a beautiful 40,000 square foot building with exhibitions and on-site programs, including a fabulous Yiddish music festival, Yidstock, which takes place this year, July 7th through 10th. And next year, we're going to be opening a new permanent core exhibit called Yiddish, a Global Culture, which is really going to be a fabulous exploration and explication of Yiddish in its many incarnations around the world. And all this is just a taste of the many things that we do. And before I take questions, I'll close by noting that many people ask, why does all this matter? Why save these books? Why is Yiddish language and culture important? As a historian, personally, I simply believe that Yiddish history and culture matter. And as a Jew, I believe we should all care about this. But I think it's bigger than that. By not teaching and engaging a younger generation in understanding the significance of Yiddish language and culture in our own history, we're missing an important opportunity. The Jewish world is always lamenting the challenges of connecting younger Jews to their Jewish heritage, but we often fail to open up the larger story of who we are and where we come from. We offer religious learning, we teach younger people about the horrors of the Holocaust, and we try to create connections to Israel. But we don't often tell them about the language that 90% of the world's Jews spoke for 1,000 years, and about the rich history and culture that was lived in Yiddish, about the ways that Yiddish culture has informed swaths of American culture, theater, comedy, literature, and more. And I'll end by showing one more clip. This is one of our fellows. We have a fellowship program that brings recent college graduates to the Yiddish Book Center for a year where they work on a project of something that they're interested in and they engage in our work. And this little clip speaks better than I can to how Yiddish engages a younger generation. So I'm going to see if I can be more successful with my screen sharing and give you this final clip.
I'm told that every day my great-great-great-grandmother would walk a block to pick up the Forwards, a Yiddish daily paper. And every day she would walk back up the wrong flight of stairs, so utterly engrossed in reading those sensational stories of the Yiddish world. As much as she loved her Mamaloshen, her mother tongue, she feared it would be the burden that prevented the next generation from becoming true Americans. And so she locked away that Yiddish world. On a whim, I began learning Yiddish in college and quickly learned that it is more than a matrix of grammar and vocabulary, but it was and is the very medium of so much of our Jewish American story. Now I feel deeply the weight of what went missing when my family stopped speaking the language. Today, I speak Yiddish to understand my past. Who do I hope to become?
So I guess that was a sort of a quick overview of everything that we're up to, and I hope gives you a little bit of a taste, a Vorspice, as we like to say, of the many ways in which we're engaging with different aspects of Yiddish language and culture and working to engage a new generation in Yiddish language and culture and everything that it represents. So I'd be happy to talk more about what we're doing, to answer questions. I see there's one question in the chat, where is the building? The Yiddish Book Center is located in Amherst, Massachusetts. It's kind of an accident of history that it's located there. Aaron Lansky, our founder, went to Hampshire College. And when he started collecting the books, he had connections there. So he rented a building in which to store the books there and developed a relationship with the president of Hampshire College, who offered essentially the Yiddish Book Center land to purchase from Hampshire College, on which the Yiddish Book Center was built, and the building opened in 1987. And we welcome visitors for all kinds of programs, and we run a lot of on-site education programs there for the college students that Aaron referred to in the film, the high school students that we talked about, the translators. We're going to be hosting rabbis and cantors and educators next year in person. This year they're remote, but it's quite a vibrant place, and it's a wonderful place to visit if you can make it out to Western Massachusetts. Ah, yes, Bob.
My father, of blessed memory, spoke Yiddish, and he spoke it to one of his friends, but he never spoke it to us. How pervasive do you find, like that last clip, that people wanted to raise their children in, middle America and didn't want to continue this German Hebrew concoction language? I think he spoke it with his friend, not my mother, so that he could avoid the conversation. We didn't understand what he was talking about, so that was a little mystery. But other than that, he didn't do it.
you know, for people of my generation, I just turned 60 and older, it is the most common story, right? I mean, my parents spoke it, my grandparents spoke it. They never taught it to me. They spoke it when they didn't want us to know what they were saying. And in fact, they would not have understood why anyone would want to learn Yiddish at this point. I mean, for them, assimilation was the most important thing. And it explains a lot about, you know, Aaron mentions this, you know, you throw it all away and start anew, you know, it explains a lot. But the world has changed quite a bit since then. And the Jewish community has changed quite a bit since then. Young people are approaching this from a very different place. Their parents, my daughters who are 23 years old, I never spoke Yiddish. They don't have that connection, but they are, the younger generation is coming at it wanting to understand who they are, just as, you know, the identity politics, of course, as you all know, it runs through everything these days. And I think for young American Jews of Ashkenazi background, you know, they want to know more. And there's so much richness in it. It's a way for them to connect to their Jewish identity it hasn't been open to them in the day school experience or in the congregational experience, and they're very enthusiastic about it. So there's some questions in the chat and some, let's see, I will take one from the chat. Jewish Heritage Month, yes, there is, and it just ended, it was May, Jewish Heritage Month. And the books are organized well. In our building, they are organized in a couple of ways. They're organized alphabetically, and then they're also organized, we have some sections that we just keep rare books in one particular section. And online, you know, well, it doesn't matter how they're organized online because you're going to search for a title online or an author and find it through a search engine, which is on our website. All you need to do is go to yiddishbookcenter.org and go to our digital collections. So let's see, Tova.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're talking about younger people wanting to learn it. One of my lifelong friends' son decided he's very facile with languages, and he studied Japanese and Yiddish when he was in high school. And in fact, his wife proposed to him, did a whole big thing and used Yiddish in her proposal, which he was not expecting at all. It was really quite, and she recorded it and shared it. So it's fascinating to me how much younger people are wanting to refine and reconnect, you know, to their heritage. I also just wanted to ask you, and maybe we can communicate later. My Zaidi was an Orthodox rabbi, and I have inherited a lot of his papers, which are in Yiddish. And I have all different things from gets that he executed. He was on a Beit Din, all kinds of things. And I think I recall that there's some organization that might be based in New York that collects things like that.
Yes, YIVO, Y-I-V-O.
Yeah,
they are really the big archive. We have some archival materials, but primarily we collect the books, and that's really the place to go for the archive. And yeah, going back to the issue of younger people, I think, as I said, I think we're not only are younger people excited to engage with this, but we're really, you know, as a community missing an opportunity by not putting it more front and center in how we engage the younger generation. Because I think the way that the post-war model of Jewish life, which was based in the shul, and people lived much more segregated communities, and you know, it was a very different time. And obviously it's a different world. I mean, you saw Cameron Bernstein, the young woman who made that lovely clip about why she cares about Yiddish. Well, obviously she is not from your standard Jewish background. She's of mixed background. She has a Filipino mother and a Jewish father, or vice versa. I'm not even sure which. We see so many young people come to us from mixed backgrounds, and they are very excited to find ways to engage with their Jewish identity. And they have found that there are so many settings where they feel like they're not Jewish enough, where they're not accepted. So I think there are many, many opportunities to bring young people into a new understanding of what it means to be Jewish and how they can understand their identity. Bob the second Bob.
Bob the second Bob.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Susan. I very much appreciate what you and those before you have been doing and continue to do, because it's just a wonderful thing. I feel the same way that Bob Smolin did in terms of his parents and grandparents speaking Yiddish. And you hit the nail on the head, Susan, when you said that they didn't want kids to know what they were talking. So reden Yiddish nach de Kinder, speaking Yiddish in front of the children so they don't know what you're saying. And I feel that I missed out a lot because of that. And I'm sure there are a lot of people of my generation who feel the same way. And it wasn't until I took German in college that I was able to understand a little bit of Yiddish that some of the remaining relatives were speaking. So it's a loss that it's not continued, but what you're doing really helps. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, Arlene, you're muted, so go ahead.
All right, I have several questions. The
Sure.
first one is, could you tell us a little bit about your actual collection? Do you have fiction and nonfiction? Do you have children's literature? What do you have?
We have everything. So imagine if suddenly everyone was throwing away English language books from their homes because no one was speaking English anymore. You would find everything from, cookbooks to popular fiction to classics to, there's books on science. There's all kinds of everything you can imagine that would be in someone's library. And now not just home libraries, we get major donations from institutions around the world. We went to Mexico City and got all the books from a Yiddish language school in Mexico City. We got a huge shipment of books from a temple in Zimbabwe that shortly thereafter burned to the ground. We've gotten books shipped to us from Australia, from Venezuela. That was quite a feat, getting books out of Venezuela. So everything you can imagine we have. There was a question, do we have books on Yiddish theater? Yes, and some of the books we have are quite beautiful. I mean, there are phenomenal illustrations by some very famous artists. There's gorgeous typeface. And the other thing we see in the books is the books themselves often are artifacts. There are inscriptions. A letter will fall out of a book. A recipe will fall out. And they tell a story in and of themselves. It's not just the book. The books tell a story about the reader of the book. So it's quite a thing. So you had more than one question?
Yes, okay. Yeah. Is there an active Yiddish publication going on nowadays? Are there any books being published in Yiddish now?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yes. Well, first of all, in the Hasidic community, there are books being published in Yiddish of a very particular bent. There's sort of an approved kind of fiction in the Hasidic community. Women write books for children, that kind of thing. So that's one thing. There are also some young people who are writing in Yiddish. Now, that's a really interesting phenomenon. It is not our primary interest because we are more interested in translating the Yiddish books into English so more people can access the literature and can understand what's in these books, because it's really a great and rich literature that people know very little about. I mean, I'm sure you know the name Sholem Aleichem from Fiddler on the Roof and so forth. People often know Isaac Bashevis Singer because he won a Nobel Prize. But beyond that, you start asking people, name some Yiddish writers. And it's kind of shocking how few people can name, considering there was this incredible flowering of creativity in Yiddish. And there are some really fabulous writing, poetry and all kinds of writing in Yiddish.
Yeah. Are all your books in Yiddish? Do you have Hebrew books about Yiddish or English books, the translations, or all your books are, is your entire collection Yiddish?
Almost. I mean, people send us boxes of things and there'll often be Hebrew books in there or there'll be English books in there. We have, but we don't really collect Hebrew books. We collect Yiddish books. So the bulk of, we've rescued probably at least 1 million books. So many books of the same title. So again, you're taking books from homes. You have the equivalent of a bestseller, whether that's the collected works of Sholem Aleichem. Everyone had them in their home. So we have multiple sets of these, which is why we sell books of which we have many, many copies. So if people sometimes want a hard copy of the book rather than reading it on their computer screen.
Okay, last question.
Okay, and then I'm going to take others.
Okay, I have a quote that you said, and I just want to make sure I have it correct. Did you say at one point 90% of the world's Jews spoke Yiddish for 1,000 years?
Yiddish was the spoken language of Jews for 1,000 years, and at one point, 90% of the world's Jews spoke Yiddish.
1,000 years surprises me. All right,
It is
when did it
absolutely
start?
true.
Yeah. Wow.
1,000
Wow.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. When did it start? Anyone have any idea
Well,
about?
1,000 years ago, what roughly, what would that be? I can't come up with the year in the top of my head, but this is true. I mean, you can, the history of the language goes way, way back. And as you know, it was the language of everyday life. The Hebrew was not a spoken language. It was a language of study and religion, and Yiddish was the language of everyday life.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. I've got a couple of questions. How many major publishing houses were there of books in Yiddish, and where were they located? Wow. Well, that's a great question. I cannot tell you how many there are. I can only tell you there were very, very many, and they were located all around the world. There were publishing houses in South America, in anywhere you found a diasporic Yiddish-speaking Jewish community, there were publishing houses. So South America, Australia, all over Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the United States. Chicago was a center of Yiddish publishing. New York was a center of Yiddish publishing. So really, anywhere there was a major Yiddish-speaking Jewish community. Mexico City, another one, and Jews there were Yiddish-speaking communities of Jews all over the world. Shanghai had a big Yiddish-speaking community because a lot of Jews, who couldn't get into the United States or other places ended up in Shanghai during World War II. So it's fascinating, these centers of Jewish publishing, which is why when we still get books to this day, we might get a book which we've never seen before because it was published in Argentina or it was published in, some other country and it wasn't part of Aaron's original collecting.
Mm.
Let's see what else.
One other question I actually
Sure.
have to follow up on that. Have you acquired a movable type yet? That goes with the Yiddish printing press?
Have we
printing
acquired?
press that you use a printing press?
Oh, we have. I wish I could. We have the last linotype that was used by the Yiddish Forward in New York. It was the last one. And they kept it going until the last union guy who ran the linotype retired. And then we were able to bring it to the Yiddish Book Center, and it's on what you're looking at right there is sort of our main public repository of books. And at the end of it, we have an exhibit about Yiddish printing, and the linotype is in that space. It's quite large. And we have a lot of other Yiddish type and Yiddish press materials. In fact, we probably have the largest collection of Yiddish type, so beautiful, either blocks or metal that was used in printing presses, and it's really quite beautiful, and some of it's quite rare.
That's amazing that was saved. That's awesome.
So yes, are there miniature books in Yiddish? Yes, and in fact, we recently did a little article about miniature dictionaries. There are tiny little dictionaries. They're everything that would exist in any other world of publishing existed in the Yiddish world of publishing. So yeah, miniature books, they're adorable. Were there a lot of Yiddish books from Argentina? Yes, I think I mentioned Argentina. There absolutely were. And in fact, there is a YIVO, which is another YIVO in Argentina, and we just recently got permission from them to upload a bunch of rare books, Yiddish books from Argentina into our digital library, and that was scholars were very excited about that. But yes, Dewey Decimal. No, they're just alphabetized in our vault. We really don't operate like a library. Our goal was, we're not really like a lending library or anything like that. Our goal was to digitize the books and make them accessible that way. And of course, as I mentioned, we do sell them. So, we just alphabetize them. So if you're looking for Chaim Grada, you go to Grada and you find his books. And then online, again, they're not cataloged that way. You can just search by author or by keyword to find what you're looking for because of our search engine and our Yiddish optical character recognition. Oh, let's see, Sheldon's iPad.
Okay. It's actually Susie, I'm on. So
Yeah.
you mentioned that the publishers publish the same thing like any other publisher. So it just came to mind. Do you have any books in large print or Braille in Yiddish? Is there such a thing? Curious.
I don't think that's a really good question. I don't think we have any, because at the time that this publishing was going on, they weren't really publishing the large print the way they have in more modern times. I mean, there are books with larger typeface, but I don't think there were. What we do have, though, I mean, there are older people who understand Yiddish who can't necessarily read the books. We have also on our website a lot of recorded books in Yiddish read by native Yiddish speakers. So people can listen to those books in Yiddish if they can't read them. And so that's that. Braille, I'm going to have to look into that. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Pamela.
So if I wanted some short Yiddish stories that have been translated into English,
oh gosh,
how do I go about that?
Well, gosh, there are so many. Well, first of all, our website alone has many, many short stories in Yiddish that are just available on our website. But there's also many, many collections of short stories that have been translated, and some most recently, I'm turning around because I'm looking for some examples. Where is On the Landing? Oh, here. So just in the last couple of years, one of our translation fellows translated a series of short stories by a writer named Yenta Mash. She wrote later in life. The book is called On the Landing, and she was born in Russia, and some of these stories are set in Siberia. They're very unexpected. It's not a lot of these books, especially the ones that we're translating by women, are not your caricatured version of what a Yiddish story is, set in a shtetl about the old country. Some of them are quite modern in their themes and quite interesting. Another one I have on my desk right here is Kaja Molodovsky, who was a well-known Yiddish poet, also published a collection of short stories called A House with Seven Windows, also quite wonderful. But you could go to our bookstore, yiddishbookcenter.org, and you can find collections of Yiddish short stories and buy them through our website. And you can also go to our website itself, where we have a lot of short stories just up there to read. And if you're also particularly interested in this kind of thing, I mean, if you're a member of the Yiddish Book Center for $54 a year, you get our magazine a couple of times a year, and you get regular emails with new translations and new works and connecting you to all kinds of programs and so forth. So it's a great way to be in the loop about new work that's coming out. We also have a book club, by the way, which I didn't mention before, where we select several books of Yiddish literature and translation every year, and everyone reads them. And then we offer reading resources and public programs related to the book and so forth. So that's another opportunity. Jewish Braille Institute. Yeah.
Yeah,
yes, Gloria.
There is a Jewish Braille Institute in New York City,
yes.
For the person who asked about that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there any other questions? Hearing none, I wanted to say this was amazing, fascinating. I know it's your wheelhouse and what you do every day, but for us who do not live in the neighborhood, it's really been very informative. And we're delighted that you could share this information. I want to thank Wayne Miller for encouraging me to give you a shout, and my appreciation to you for spending the time with us and sharing the good works of the Yiddish Book Center.
Well, it is more than my pleasure, and I just want to add that, I again apologize for the technical glitch, and if those oral histories are of interest to you, just go to the website, look under our digital collections and you can browse through so many of them. We have Leonard Nimoy, we have Norman Lear, we have Fivish Finkel, all of these people whose names you probably recognize, but also just people like this wonderful woman who you heard speak about what it was like to wave goodbye to her grandmother who she never saw again. I think they're really, really amazing. I see one more question in the chat. Reaching out to about Evo. No, if you go to their website at Evo, you can just you can go to their archive section, and that will be where you can reach out. And I encourage you to you guys can feel free to be in touch with me. To please stay in touch with the Yiddish Book Center. Please consider joining if you're not a member. We love new members, and we need your support to continue all this work that we're doing. And it was really, really fun to speak with you all. So thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome. We're delighted that you shared with us a thread of our legacy from that European history where we probably all came from the Pale settlement and from Poland and Hungary and every other settle along the way is a story, and those stories are in those books. And whether it's the humor, the sarcasm, the information, the politics, you're sharing a piece that, although those who wanted to leave behind didn't realize that our legacy was also being left behind, and it's better for us to connect than to discard. So I'm truly delighted that you could share. I want to thank our audience for participating, and we do really appreciate your spending your time and sharing with us so much about this. So I'm really delighted that you were able to do this today. And David Namro shares with us that you get his little last comment there. I think very locally at Cedar Park, Bethel would be proud. So we're certainly proud. We are alive and well are doing the same.
All right,
Susan, thank you so much. We'll encourage you to join, and thank you
very much.
Part of the Temple Israel's Temple Talks.
Have a good evening.
All
Good
right.
night, everybody.
Thank you so very much. It was wonderful.